History, episode 115, Wednesday night, back in the saddle. Gary, what's going on?
Well, a person who I've long admired and just has done tremendous work in the sphere of Austrian economics, uh, laudatory of free market enterprise and all that's good and even decent within, I don't know, social activity and uh yeah, just social action, human action, if I could use the Mies term. Peter St. Onge is really going off, and especially he's diagnosing the inherent and destructive problems with the uniparty here in the United States.
I love that he calls it the uniparty.
Mhm.
We need to start referring it as that. That's got to be the new fake news.
Well,
The uniparty.
that's long been the trope of every good commentator, whether we're talking about Dave Smith through Tom Woods, Michael Malice.
Yeah.
hmm So, but he's really doing, and all of his short videos and then longer form videos on profsaintange.com are all so instructive in that they give you the economic background so that when you're forming arguments to move a normie away from normiedom and into some semblance of the light, remove the veil from the eyes, if you will, that they are just overwhelmed by the evidence and the analysis that he provides that's so clear and distinctive and convincing.
So what's he done this time?
Well, he's really going after this new sham of a budget. It's really just a continued spending resolution that'll run for yet another 6 months that funds a government that is woefully bankrupt. It's again just making worse the characterization that is quite novel and unique within all of human history, that the United States is both the brokest and also richest country in human history. So how can that be done? It can be done through, for example, reliance upon the dollar's global fiat reserve status. It can be done through manipulation, the malinvestment, investment bubbles that continue to be blown up and yet aren't popping yet. So, yeah, uh, it's a real house of sand, and he's diagnosing that the people who are building and piling on more weight upon this house of cards, house built upon sand, to use a biblical reference, boy, they're just exacerbating the long-term problems and effects. But and we shouldn't say that they're that the sure the catastrophe is waiting down the road, economic, social, but we're already seeing the deleterious, harmful, and really degrading effects of all of those nefarious influences and toxic ingredients that have provided moral hazard for society, uh, intensified vice as opposed to virtue and prosperity, hard work, industry, and the like.
They passed it at 3 in the morning.
As he says, because they're so proud of their work, you know.
Yeah, that
Remember,
doesn't really.
remember all those although I'm not a fan, all those Taylor Swift albums that she, you know, posted in the dead of night or tried to suppress publicity for, or for which she tried to suppress publicity. Yeah, I don't remember those either.
Right.
No.
Do you know any other details that you wanted to share that stuck out to you on the plan?
Oh,
Or
sure.
what stood
How about
out?
well, yeah, well, it's spending is another 1.2 trillion over 6 months. Annualized, of course, that's 2.4 trillion.
Yeah. The
Speaker
T with
Johnson
the T.
with a T
Six
trillion.
6 months.
Yes, that's right. Yes, we're running hundreds of billions of dollar deficits each month.
How do we
The
get that money?
We print it, or we hit a, or the Federal Reserve, in coordination with the Treasury, keeps issuing, just having to issue bonds, and then furthermore, they they put those as assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, and then what else do we have? We have just the printing more fiat to facilitate and pour into banks. All this creating an enormous, enormous equity bubble Um, it's not, everybody wonders where inflation's going. Has anyone seen the stock market? The price to earnings ratios on companies are so outlandishly high. We're reaching and surpassing 1929 levels
Mm.
and 1987 and 1999 levels. It's quite scary. But so yes, and by the way, as you pump more money in, we know through the Cantillon effect that the inflationary effects, the more beneficial ones, all redound to those already in the money and connected, because before the money can circulate and go through uh, the cycle of the economy, of course, it resides first in the banks, and it's loaned out quickly to those banks, those creditors with whom the banks already have tight affiliation and accounts, and therefore the non-inflated dollars, of course, are utilized and stocked away, or spent in a process of investment or consumption, and then by the time the dollars diffuse down to the lower classes and to the plebes, of course, its purchasing power is reduced to, well, worse than that of the ruble, let's say,
Hmm.
to peek at Joe Biden. Okay, so of course Speaker Johnson, Peter St. Ange, as you're going to see in the video, we'll play the video in a moment. Speaker Johnson gets none of the things for which he was elevated to the speakership after Kevin McCarthy was deposed and ousted. The spending package, I'm just hitting the highlights here. Of course, you're going to see Peter elaborate upon them in a moment. The entire bill is 1,932 pages long. Thomas Massey, among others, complained, as just happens routinely in these circumstances when Republicans are afraid of taking the blame for a government shutdown because they're so utterly uh, petrified at the prospect of any liberal media outlet, which is nearly all of them, castigating them for a government shutdown for whatever reason. I guess they think that it's electorally uh, harmful to them. But it's 1,932 pages long. It was, as you said, Charlie, released at 3 a.m. in the morning, or that's redundant. Um, he highlights a couple things. The most poignant of these are the pork in it. There's a National Red Flag Center, which is going to mitigate and if not totally destroy your Second Amendment liberties by just deeming you as an extremist. Um, we're called extremists on an hourly basis, would you think, Charlie, for people who become acquainted
I
with us?
wish we need more
We need more
listeners.
extremists. Well, yeah,
We need
well,
more listeners to get to an hourly level, but
yeah. Well,
we're
sure
getting
enough,
there.
once we get on the Southern Poverty Law Center's radar, and then they're going to transfer that information to the National Red Flag Center, there goes my and our Second Amendment rights. Let's hope that that doesn't happen, but it sure is setting up for that, thanks to the Republicans in the House. You have a $200 million new allocation, which for whatever reason, Trump, in an well, it's not altogether odd because he's kind of just lazy, in a lazy moment, has heralded as a major coup or advancement, a $200 million allotment for a new FBI building in Washington, D.C. Then you have the NAACP, which is ostensibly not a public entity, but is yet again through corporatism and what activism mongering, I suppose you could call it, receiving $500,000 for their new headquarters. Excuse me, that obviously upset me. Um, anyway,
I actually, because you've started to, have you seen the show Rick and Morty? It's not very Catholic.
no, I mean I've seen like just ads of it.
Sure, but the character Rick, he's
Hmm.
this kind of like alcoholic, evil scientist type guy,
Okay.
and they'll keep it in the show, but he'll just burp
Oh,
every once
okay.
in a while mid-show, and it kind of has that same effect when you're rattling off about history, and then you get a coughing attack. It's almost like you're in a library of dusty books,
Oh, okay.
and you're just like flipping through, and you just start ripping a cough. I
Yeah.
kind of, I think it gives a more authentic feel to the podcast.
I wish I knew the direct cause of it, other than just respiratory cold or whatever, a
Yeah.
sickness. Um, whether it's a virus or not, that's another rabbit hole. But it would be better if I was just ripping heaters all day and I just lit one up and then I just started going.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, that would be way cooler.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's see.
Should we
Oh, and then
should we play the video?
yeah, let's play the video. And then, but the one thing I want to highlight before we play the video is just how I hope that those who are listening in the audience really pay attention to what he says in the end. I really want to highlight the nature of the transformation that is, from my perspective, it started when we ended the book. It started with the revolution was in 1945. And what we're realizing in our lifetimes at present is the total fruition and ripening of this noxious fruit from a terribly awful and demonic tree that's plaguing everything from our social relations to certainly our politics and even economics. So we can play this now.
In case you thought Republicans in Congress were vaguely interested in reining in the out-of-control federal spending that's driving the economy to stagflation and leaving the American people to fight over the crumbs, they are not. Last week, as widely expected, GOP Speaker Johnson caved on another $1.2 trillion in spending, handing the Dems everything their grabby little hearts could desire. Now, one might argue this is disappointing since the Republicans control the House, meaning they control, in theory, the purse strings, as in, if they don't pass a budget, nothing gets spent. Of course, that power is completely neutered since Republicans are afraid of shutting down the government because they'll get blamed by the left-wing media for making grandma eat the cat food. This pork-packed spending bill was over 1,000 pages long, plus another 932 pages of, quote, explanatory statements, which is where they stuff all the really ugly things. Naturally, it was released at 3 a.m. since our government is deeply proud of the work it does. It funds a bevy of 6 agencies for the next 6 months and also includes fun little Easter eggs like a new National Red Flag Center that will spend $750 million, implying it will hire thousands of agents, to attack your Second Amendment rights. In fact, those goons might even be housed at the FBI's new $200 million headquarters, also funded by this bill, presumably as a reward for being so helpful hunting down peaceful protesters who the regime does not like. So in short, the uniparty swamp wins again. National debt will continue growing. At the moment, it's running $1 trillion every 100 days, while, of course, the Republicans managed to get precisely nothing done about our gaping wound of a southern border or any of the other major promises. Now, in fairness, the $1.2 trillion bill does do a lot of other things. It funds legal immigrant nonprofits, hormone therapies for regendering kids, and it gives $500,000 for the NAACP's new headquarters. Note, the NAACP is, in theory, not actually a government agency. Along with $1 million for an LGBT community center in Philly that will help it fund monthly fetish parties. While I freely admit that monthly fetish parties are an important federal function, one might ask if there's not something else we could have spent the money on, like, say, a border. Moreover, these are not just about corruption, they illustrate how the deep state works. So the left uses tax money to fund its own activist army, while the GOP is happy to hold their beer, so long as there's some artillery in there for Ukraine. And you might remember during Trump, every time the media pearl-clutched over some fresh tweet, there was an insta-mob of hundreds protesting the street in about 15 minutes flat. Asked why the right cannot summon instant mobs, the running joke was that our people have jobs. But the much darker truth is that the left's activists are literally paid to protest. They are paid by you, a literal tax-funded activist army, funded $1 million at a time. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. At this point, the federal deficit is approaching 8% a year, which is the kind of number you only see if we are in the depths of a major recession or the depths of a major war. For that to be happening in relative peacetime, both economically and kinetically, suggests Washington has completely lost control. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.
Yeah, so America's cooked, essentially.
It's cooked. But that thing at the end that I wanted to stress was he makes that salient and intelligent point about how one wonders the last time we had these rounds of continuing resolutions and why, for example, in 2020, we had all the Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests, and the retaliatory quip on the right was, well, the reason why we don't, outside of like moments after the great financial crisis, like the right with the Tea Party, why there's not a surge of right-wing protesters and why we can't cull such angst and direct it toward our elected officials is because people on the right, conservatives, if you want to call them such, are, well, we have jobs and the left doesn't have jobs. But as Peter St. Onge pointed out, and this is especially apparent in how your children are being educated in governmental schools, they're no longer being educated, they're being trained as activists. And when they leave, whether they're leaders who come from Columbia and from Brown and from Dartmouth, or from Colgate or wherever they're coming from, or they're the simpletons that dropped out of college, or they were at least, maybe they were wise enough at first not to go and then become disaffected, but they become disaffected and thus socialists and glommers on to critical theory or whatever. Well, what ends up happening is they're doing what they've been trained to do, and they're out there in the streets. And how can they continue to do it and maintain a livelihood? Because they're being paid to do so by the same supposedly right-wing conservative or independents who are at work and having to pay the taxes and for all of their debt forgiveness as it's written in the bill, and then all of the other insane pork projects that are just protectionist handouts to congressmen in their districts.
Yeah. It really is disgusting stuff.
It is,
And
but that's why we should be proud to be, as Walter Block said, the third rung on the stool. I mean, we're the third leg. People are, I think, unfortunately, this is where I want to lament a little bit RFK coming to such prominence right now. Because absent of RFK, this might have been the moment where people say, oh my God, enough of this uniparty. You have the Republicans are more than happy to kowtow to every demented aspiration of the left and the AOC Rashida Tlaib crowd, just so they could get more funding for their Zionist project, because they're also more than happy to bend on knee and beck and call to Benjamin Netanyahu and to Vladimir Zelensky to maintain this insane empire with 750 military bases in locations that Americans can't even find on a map, and have at best radically tangential connections and absurdly ridiculous liaisons to anything that might amount to or be defined as national security, right? So they're more than happy. And then on the left is gone. I mean, so when Robert Kennedy comes in, or when RFK Jr. comes in, he's really, in my estimation, siphoning off a lot of the energy that might have otherwise gone to. Now, people, especially libertarians, might say, well, this hasn't happened in past cycles, but there was, during the Ron Paul movement, there was concerted energy, especially as Dr. Paul said in his interview with Tucker Carlson. There was immense energy coming from young people, college age people who were disaffected and disgusted by the war machine of the American empire, the churning out of people ill-equipped to enter the modern workforce, and they're left destitute and wondering why. They're wondering why there was such a paucity of opinion within those college classes that were thought to be the portal to opportunities, but only landed them in immense debt. And they came to wonder why it is that we have a central bank and why it all of a sudden just glommed onto a 2% inflation target, as if it was that number fell from the sky
Mm-hmm.
from it. Well, in their minds, it must have been the Norse gods or something like that, or some other semi-divine authority. But that's their stage. So it has, and I just fear as though is he controlled opposition? Is he's definitely a simp for Israel and the Zionists. Um, so that's a shame. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about what Peter with Dr.
Yeah,
Steinhardt?
I think we're cooked. It's a huge black pill. I don't know how long we can do this post-merit society
Mm-hmm.
where none of the important people really care about God or the people that they govern. And I don't I guess we've never really seen something like this play out, but
Mm-hmm.
I got a feeling that it wouldn't make sense for this to last long. And I think that we're going to look back on, I was looking back at one of the, shout out to our sponsor, Tridentine Brewing. I was looking back at one of our Twitter exchanges between me, you, and Trevor. And I was kind of trying to play the white pill with politically, because we had both Rechtenwald and Vivek, doing like really cool stuff. And I felt like they were both getting momentum talking about stuff that just not a lot of people, pretty much no one in politics was even touching on. And I thought they were going to be a lot bigger than their campaigns have been. And that was a big reason that I was pretty white pilled at the time. And now looking back, I look like an idiot for being the young optimist. And Trevor's like, I don't really have hope for this. And I tried to, I guess I was trying to, I don't know if cheer him up is the right word, but my case was to be more of the white pilled case. And I don't believe that anymore. I'm probably even more black pilled than Trevor, as far as when the numbers don't crunch, the money eventually runs out, right? You have to get the money from somewhere, and you can't just have this infinite bank balance that you're just constantly pumping out. And 1.2 trillion in 6 months is something that I don't even think we could imagine. Could you imagine? I don't know the relative numbers about how much these bills usually cost, but you made the point that this whole fruition came at the start of the end of our book, or
Mm-hmm.
when the book was being written. And I'm starting to think, man, 1.2 trillion in 6 months. Would we even imagine that before COVID? Like, could we
No.
even imagine that much money being pumped out in that short of a time? But the thing is, now it doesn't matter because they've already done it once, and it's easier to do it
Sure.
the second time when you've already done it. So
Yeah, it's Robert Higgs ratchet effect just applied to budgets in general rather than bills.
yeah, now we just have this constant cycle where these people face no resistance, to do whatever they want. And Peter correctly puts it, it's the uniparty. This is the idea that this is like having a conversation about Democrat versus Republican seems so silly to me right now,
Oh,
about how these people
sure.
have different letters by their name, and
Yes.
they have different colors in the background.
They're just beholden to different demons, but the destination is all the same, right?
I like how you put that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this speaks to I remember this was a couple years ago when AOC started tweeting about the Green New Deal. And of course, the Congressional Budget Office scored the Green New Deal as something around the lines of 900, or no, it was something like $400 trillion, which is more money than was extant within the world at the time, if you dollarized everything. And she, to her credit, now, of course, she's diluted her premise. She starts from the wrong premise, but her conclusion is sound when she said, look, I've been sitting in Congress and there's been no consideration about the lack of money to fund the empire or to fund corporatism or to fund this or that interest of the government. So what she considered, therefore, was that resistance to the Green New Deal, no matter how absurdly expensive in real and figurative terms, was. It just simply, and this is a contagion among the modern left too. You'll never hear about like fiscal limitations, even from people that don't have the power of the printing press, like a local mayor like Brandon Johnson or Eric Adams. There's no consideration about where or what the level of investment, which means just spending and allocation, ought to be in neighborhoods or for this cause or for that leftist SIEU union backing, whatever the initiative is. All that's lacking from the left's perspective is political will. The political will is and from where do they get that idea? They get that idea from the fact that they have zero economic understanding. But what in a way concretized that or proved that falsehood to have some relative veracity behind it was the fact that in their lifetimes, and especially in AOC's experience in Congress, the numbers are just simply made up. And what really moves congressional action in terms of legislation, and then what certainly moves action, whether it's from in various deep state organizations, is not their budget limitations, right? It's just their will to get it done. So if you pout and if you protest and if you become active enough as an activist, you're bound to get your way. That's why they use all this flowery, stupid Disney language like, oh, well, if we could dream it, we can make it true. Or you have, even with the bridge collapse and with the Francis Scott Key Bridge with the tanker running into the to the support in the Patapsco River. I mean, what the mayor of Baltimore and the governor of Maryland come out and they're just talking like in platitudes. Oh, this is a terrible tragedy, but the spirit of the people of Baltimore will come together and will be unified to rectify, and all this bullshit that they spew. They don't talk about, well, and maybe they're right, but why would you speak about budgetary limitations or the cost of this? Because after all, Biden comes on the next day and says the federal government's going to pay for it. Why? The natural conclusion among people who have absolutely no economic knowledge is just going to be, well, you just have to will it and it'll be done.
Yeah. I think that has a lot of mental effects too on the people within Baltimore,
It does. It has horrific.
The social impact of that, what you were just
horrific
describing.
moral hazard
Yeah.
surrounding it. Because then if you're disadvantaged, if you're poor, if you're not remunerated at the level that, of course, you subjectively see is fair, well, then there has to be some underhanded individual that is colluding with some other force, name it, the more abstract, the better, racism, sexism, the gender pay gap, you name it. And they're colluding to make sure you're held down. And of course, there are forces that are colluding to hold you down. They're all institutions within the government. But what the governmental schools, of course, and Dave Smith is just perfect on this, what the governmental schools have done is to so misdirect your attention from the real disastrous and malevolent actors, malefactors, and then direct it towards some amorphous cause. So therefore, you're always aggrieved, and you're always looking for the government to remediate the problem. It's never within your agency to do
Right.
so.
Yeah. Yeah. The social effects of that are disastrous.
Mm-hmm.
Another disaster, to switch gears here, is trying to say Christ is king in March 2024.
Candace Owens knows the recipe for a shitstorm. Declare Christus Rex. Now, in fairness, she didn't use the Latin. That would have been huge if she used the Latin. I think
Yeah.
trads would have been like, whoa! But she used just Christ key, which is good.
Yeah. Crazy time on Catholic Twitter where we don't even. Trevor used to go back to Trevor, he used the word or the phrase control.
Yes.
This is a psyop. I'm going to take it a little further. This is a psyop. This is the same thing as when at the time of Jesus, when they have the coin and Caesar's face is on it, it says Son of God.
Mm.
You either believe that or you don't, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you either believe that, no, it's not Caesar, it's actually Jesus, or it's not. And this entire, probably, I mean, the oldest government psyop in the book is convincing the governed that those who govern are descendants of God. And we see this, it's a lot more direct back then. They can't get away with saying, Joe Biden's a descendant of God, because no one would believe that. But other phrases like our democracy, and when the Capitol building gets sacked, they talk about this sacred institution and all of those religious terms. This all plays into Christ as King. All of those things that I just mentioned, it's in that same realm of it's either him or it's someone else.
That's it. That's it. Choose in times this stark and dark. You got to pick a side, and you better choose wisely. And it seems like Candace Owens is choosing wisely. Of course, she revealed that her husband is Catholic, and she's very deeply in a state of contemplative discernment about entering the church in very short order. I hope that this experience, given that it has such resonance with how every one of the saints who are persecuted for their undying dedication to the notion that Christ is king above any secular or temporal authority. And that, in consideration of today's topic of which we're talking about right now, regarding Christus Rex, I went back and listened again to our episode on the 4 passages in Scripture that are most challenging to an anarchist, or even more precisely an anarcho-capitalist position. And we treat those fairly, understanding the general interpretation of them, and then offering something that is more, I think, more in keeping with the original intent, but also the spirit of what's attempting to be conveyed within the text. Also, what is consistent with the greater corpus of Scripture, and how revelation has been divulged to us over time by Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I just walked away from that thinking again to promote yet another episode was that episode we did when we said, and I hope Candace Owens is taking some solace in just the grace and the calm that can come from an acceptance of that episode we did entitled Come What May, right? At some point, you have to surrender your will, your all, your intellect, your passions to the God-made man who is here to redeem us, especially as we contemplate that as we approach the Paschal Triduum.
Yeah.
So, and one can argue that a formal feast and declaration of Christ the King didn't come until the 20th century with Pius the 11th, but to not understand that everyone, I mean, it's almost what Pius the 11th promulgated in Quas Primas was simply in 1925 just reiteration, or he was taking a highlighter to the entirety of the churches and Christian history, just saying, yeah, of course we celebrate Christ as our King and our all, the Lord of Lords, the Son of God, the King of Kings. And underneath him are what might call the maybe good elements within society that might be pointed to some type of leadership roles or what have you, but they're far beneath him. And then in the depths of hell are those, or if they're not in hell yet, are those who are exerting coercive power, just as he warned, our Lord warned the Pharisees not to. And he piqued the Romans time and time again as a subversive, as we talked about, whether it's throwing demons into pigs and calling them legion, which is just boss. And then through his death and resurrection, having his church, this community of believers, conquer Rome and appropriating what was good about the Roman Empire and then crushing what was bad about it. So I thought Trevor's been great on Twitter. Trevor Alcorn of Tridentine Brewing, been great on reminding people, whether they're Lila Rose, who's a champion. Lila Rose is a champion for the unborn. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But she is an absolute dunce on this subject. She just doesn't know her head from her ass on this one. Okay. So this is a quote that Trevor posted. He says, "The social reign of Christ the King is on earth. It's not just some heavenly reality far off in the transcendent distance. His power, his sovereignty is to be recognized in our temporal lives and in our allegiance to his true temporal hierarchy, where he is the head and no one else. When once," again, this is Pope Pius the 11th, "when once men recognize both in private and in public life that Christ is King, society will at last receive the great blessings of real liberty, well-ordered discipline, peace, and harmony." And that's such a beautiful statement because, again, when we have a correct hierarchy, whether they are a hierarchy of needs, our hierarchy of virtue, our hierarchy of those to whom we ought to pay obedience, if that hierarchy is all jumbled up and out of order, well, then our lives, our dispositions, the way we're ordering our life is out of order. And thus, therefore, we're reminded that when St. Paul uses the Greek word for sin, it's the same word of when an archer takes back the bow and he misses his target. We're disordered. So we have to get rightly ordered again. And no order is sufficient for happiness, fulfillment, holiness, and ultimately deification in this life, to use the Athanasian sense of that term, or Athanasius's emphasis on that term. No one else can provide that to us, that direction, except having Christ as our head. Now, I responded to Trevor's tweet, and I might just show this.
Yeah, pull it up.
Sure. Let me make
Also,
sure. Yes.
you mentioned this. We obviously have the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the universe, which I would think would debunk any any pushback on if Christ is the only the people that think that Christ is only King of heaven. I feel like that kind of gets debunked by that
Oh, sure.
due to the earth being within the universe. And
Oh,
then also, the fifth glorious mystery is the coronation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Queen of Heaven and Earth.
right.
But
Yes.
now that I've looked it up, some people just have Queen of Heaven, and I
Ah,
don't know if that's like,
purposeful or trying to get around this.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, she what does she declare about the word? He casts down the mighty from their thrones and lift up the lowly. I mean, huh, for all the misinterpretations of Romans 13 and Peter 1:2, there's Mary as the Immaculate Mother and portal for the divine into the world, right? In her Theotokos status, proclaiming something quite anarchic, isn't she? So I wrote back, and I hope people recognize that in the Latin Rite on Palm Sunday, there was a tradition in which at the beginning of the Mass, someone would knock on the doors 3 times, doom, doom, doom. And it was a beautiful liturgical ritual, and it was supposed to symbolize Jesus knocking at the door of Jerusalem to open its gates to him. Again, the city of Jerusalem being that ultimate mount representation of Mount Zion, in which the Lord will be welcomed and worshipped. Yeah. So
mhm.
he begs to be, in a sense, allowed entrance into his holy city. And that's why I started this tweet as boom, boom, boom. He knocks at the door, Jerusalem. Answer and worship him as the Savior, or choose Caesar as your God and put him up on the cross. Jerusalem's to be either Mother Church or foretold harlot. And this is coming from a lot of what I had just read in Taylor Marshall's book, expertly read by Kennedy Hall, our friend, of course, friend of the show, about the Antichrist and the Apocalypse, in which his exegesis, which I think is just absolutely in keeping with Old Testament foretelling and prognostication, and then, of course, fulfilled in the New Testament through our Lord's life, death, and resurrection, is that what constitutes the new Babylon, the sinful city from which the Antichrist will emerge, and all of these horrible sins will be perpetuated, and terrible sins against and offenses against God. Well, it's Jerusalem rejecting the Messiah, marrying itself, and then, of course, engaging in the rampant sins that have gone on since uh, the rejection of Christ, particularly by, again, those who should have known him, by the Jews, and then again choosing violence and all these things that have transpired since, Zionism and worship of the state and all of that, and then the marrying of that, instead of having Jerusalem wed to the divine king who's demanding entrance, the divine king is taken out, or attempted to be taken out and rejected. And to whom does Jerusalem wed itself? Of course, Mars, to Rome. And for those of you who haven't read the book, and then the noxious nuptials, if you will, of those two cities is the new Babylon, the font of all this evil that has come and will come into the world. It's just really powerful stuff in Apocalypse, and people forget, because there's a lot of symbolism about the the city, the New Babylon having 7 hills, and people like Protestants might immediately glom onto, well, of course and Luther and Calvin and Zwingli and Knox, they all did this. They said, of course, the New Babylon, the harlot city is Rome because it has 7 hills. You know what other city has 7 hills, Charlie? Jerusalem. Jerusalem has 7 hills. Okay. So the merger of the two is what transforms the two cities into the civilization of the of Satan.
Do you want to talk about another town that's unfortunately been overrun by
I am
Satan?
unaware of this town, this western suburb of Chicago, having hills at all. It's pretty flat.
I wasn't
filled
gonna
with broad
say
lawns and narrow mines.
I'm sure you could find 7 hills big enough. Depends what you refer to as a hill, I guess.
Hills of trash or hills of leaves piled up in the streets.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Meanwhile, in Oak Park police stop more black individuals than white, data shows. The racial disparity in traffic stops reflects a statewide issue. In 2022, black drivers made up more than half of the 2,814 traffic stops Oak Park police officers conducted, despite only making up about 19% of the population in the village.
We pause right there. What a faulty stat. That doesn't, do they have any statistics? You'd have to know what the percentage of drivers are. Just because the 19% of the village is black,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that 19% of them are drivers. What if a higher percentage of the drivers are black compared to white?
Doesn't fit the narrative. White
Right.
individuals make up about 63% of the population in Oak Park, but are stopped only roughly a third of the time, according to data from the Investigative Project on Race and Equity. So the Investigative Project on Race and Equity, that's what you'll hear where these companies make Oak Park shells them out tens of thousands of dollars to do these case studies to come up with stats like you were just describing.
And by the way, would you even, it's the conclusion's already written for them.
Right.
It's all just deduction from that point on.
Yeah, you can't get paid if you say that. No,
Yeah,
actually,
exactly.
the cops
think they're going to get hired again if they come out and say, you know what?
The cops are actually doing fair work here.
Vicky Skaman, you're going to be wowed by this. The cops are really hunting down white people here.
Yeah. Hey, Vic, you wouldn't believe this. The cops actually don't know the person's skin color before pulling them over. Right.
And then we also found in this large survey and study that oftentimes if they have a rainbow flag sticker or a coexist bumper sticker, they're not pulled over at all. It's like a get out of jail free card.
Yeah. Overall, traffic stops in Oak Park are down from a high of more than 13,000 in 2006. Sheesh.
Whoa. So in 2022, there were just over 2,800.
Yeah, and in 13,000? What were they
in 2006, there were 13,000.
13,000 traffic stops? That cannot be right.
I don't
know. That's 35, maybe. Gary, that's 35 a day.
I don't know.
35 traffic stops a day? 35 pullovers.
It's possible.
My goodness. However, black drivers also were more likely to be issued a citation after the stop, the data shows. The racial gap, the data indicated, is only getting bigger.
Well, why didn't they share that? Do they not have data from 2006?
I don't know.
It'd be interesting to determine if that was supposedly still going on. Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
WBEZ and the Investigative Project on Race and Equity compiled reports of traffic stop records during the past 2 decades, looking at more than 1,000 law enforcement agencies in Illinois including the Oak Park, to build a searchable database of them. This
Wait,
is what I have
there's
to
that, is that
Gary, this is what I have to deal with on a weekly basis, including the Oak Park.
For those of you who just listen to the audio, we decided to, for video viewers, put the actual Wednesday Journal article up
So
on
you
the
get
video.
to, so you get to read along with me.
Before, I just thought Charlie was semi-retarded
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and really couldn't read.
Yeah. To build a searchable database of them. The reporting showed
Well,
evidence
that's a
of
great set. Wait, can you read that sentence again and just try to make it sound like English?
the one with the first one with the grammar error.
No, just that WEBZ.
Okay, yeah.
WBEZ.
WBEZ and the Investigative Project on Race and Equity compiled reports of traffic stop records during the past 2 decades, looking at more than 1,000 law enforcement agencies in Illinois, including the Oak Park, to build a searchable database of them. The reporting showed evidence.
Wait, and I should note that during is spelled wrong.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yeah.
Yeah, during. Yeah.
The reporting showed evidence of increasing racial disparities in policing, not only in Oak Park, but also around the state. The percentage of traffic stops in Illinois with black drivers has reached its highest level in recent years, according to the analysis. Here they go. The stats get a little better, including drivers.
All
In
right.
2021 and 2022, roughly 30.5% of traffic stops in the state involved black drivers. In 2004, it was 17.5% of stops, but only 13.6% of Illinois' adult population was black at the time of that report.
Okay.
So they just did it again. They did the drivers, they use a good stat and then they combine it with a bad stat.
Correct.
Data
And
from
you know what else would be of interest if you were sincere about finding if there were, and of course they're not sincere, but if there are multivariant explanations for this, is look at the distances that black versus white drivers go. Like what's the mileage per capita, right? Because one would suspect that if black drivers are driving longer distances for work, or more so that they're in jobs that require driving, that both their time and the mileage,
or they just drive who drives through Oak Park.
Precisely. Remember, you have its entire Oak Park's entire eastern border is the city, and most of that is with Austin and Galewood, and Austin's predominantly black, so you'd have to get statistics if you're doing just basic, rudimentary, and fair, even substantially conclusive analysis. You'd have to get, well, how many people are driving, not just the percentage of Oak Parkers who happen to be black is disproportionate to the people who are pulled over.
Yeah, it's a clown show. This is what we have to deal with.
Right. What I don't appreciate, if they're just going to do the activism, just come out and just do the activism.
Right, exactly.
What's with this like
don't try to like out math me, dude.
Or just don't out math me. Don't try to sell me some lame story. Because, you know?
Yeah.
So just come do the activism thing, because that's what you're good at, okay? And then don't waste my time with the whole attempt to this kabuki theater of attempting to explain with analysis or some evidence.
Data from Free to Move, a Chicago-based nonprofit that works to make traffic stops and safety more equitable, echoes those figures. Quote, "It seemed as if police were really using the traffic safety system and traffic stops as an excuse to stop and target black and brown drivers and pedestrians and bikers," said Amy Thompson, staff counsel at Impact for Equity.
Pause here. Notice how they just drop in the brown drivers. If you're going to include yet another group and distinguish them
this is the quote, but yeah.
But still, okay, but they're dropping them in, right? Even as this person does, this Amy Thompson, who, looks every bit of what you would think she looks like, because they provide her picture. I assume that's her picture. But in any case, sure enough, if you notice that there's no statistics on among Hispanic, i.e., brown drivers, however that's defined by these amorphous racial terms that we use that are ridiculous. But so what are their incidents? What is the frequency of their incidents of being pulled over and ticketed?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I'm doing my
Go
best to
ahead.
figure it out too. One of the member organizations of Freedom Move, quote, "We were motivated to think about what a traffic safety system could look like that doesn't rely on that kind of discriminatory behavior and instead makes us all safer."
Okay, so they're just acting on the premise that the major intent and motivation. I don't know about you, but when if let's say I was a cop and I saw I pulled, like, in the process of pulling them over, I mean, how many times do they even know what the racial makeup of the person is?
That's what I was saying.
Like, I would assume that they're pulling them over. They have relatively little idea. My guess would be 90% of the time.
I guess
And
they would
this is
have a
coming.
clue. I guess they would have a clue. Like you were saying, the east border of Oak Park. I guess they could have some idea if they're targeting those areas. But
Mhm.
yeah,
And
I mean,
right,
they're trying to build a case, like they
right.
anyways.
You mean the guy with the 21-inch rims on his Honda Accord with hydraulics might not be Juan the gay guy
Yeah.
living in your building?
Yeah. The group collected its data through Freedom of Information Act requests to agencies that include the Chicago Police Department and Illinois Department of Transportation, as well as through interviews with drivers who have experienced traffic stops. And here's where it gets good.
Oh, wait, I think, is that a picture of Shitanya?
Oh, we're gonna get the chief.
Oh, finally, I got a picture of Shitanya.
Oak Park's disparity. The figures may come as a shock to Oak Park residents, many of whom pride themselves for their progressive values.
Get out.
In 2014, a village forum was held, spurred by riots in Ferguson, Missouri, after the shooting of a black man, Michael Brown. At the time, Rick Tanksley, Oak Park's former police chief, talks about joining a department that had problems with race at a community-sponsored event. But he produced data that showed how the racial makeup of the Oak Park Police Department mirrored the village. He also showed more data that demonstrated how black drivers were as likely to be ticketed as a white driver.
Oh, I have one word to say to Rick Tanksley. Cracker.
Yeah. Today, I can't help myself but laugh at all of this. I get like the giggles reading these types of articles because I just can't believe this is real. This is
Right.
the timeline that we're on. God could have chosen any time for us, and he chose this.
God
So
doth
anyways,
have a sense of humor.
today, according to Oak Park Police Chief Shitanya Johnson, it's not a matter of internal bias or discrimination. It's a matter of numbers. The population that lives here is different from the population that commutes in and out of the village, and that affects the ratio of stops, she said. Okay,
This would be a perfect time to see with numbers how it affects the ratio of stops.
Okay, here we go. We have more individuals that may come from maybe Austin or surrounding communities to shop due to the lack of grocery stores in their communities, she said. We do have a different demographic coming in for those reasons. Oak Park Police Chief Shitanya Johnson, voice of reason so far.
Oh, boy.
Kevin Barnhart, chair of the Citizens Police Oversight Committee. That sounds like a committee that you should sign up for, Gary. Said he doesn't believe that complexity explains the disparity.
No, of course not. Don't let your police chief.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. He said he doesn't believe that completely explain. I think I said complexity. Quote,
Wow.
if we were to say that there were more black drivers in Oak Park because of the neighboring communities, then there also has to be an assertion that those drivers are somehow driving worse than other drivers to have the numbers, he said. Come on, dude.
Wait, what did I miss there?
That's
You
not,
don't need that.
that's
not
not
true.
That's not true.
Think if they
Oh my gosh. If the
They're
town
so
is
dumb.
no, if the town that's so stupid, dude. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life.
And by the way, what does he mean by more black drivers? More black drivers compared to when? Compared to
No, what he's saying is that if drivers are coming in from Austin into Oak Park,
Yes.
that the racial that's Shitanya's point, is that these people are coming in from, these black people are coming in from Austin
The
to
more
Oak
drivers,
Park.
the more they're
Yeah,
likely to be pulled over.
but Kevin's trying to build this case that these drivers from Austin, that we're trying to assume that they're bad, they're worse at driving for getting pulled over more.
Yeah.
Quote, if there are more drivers, that doesn't necessarily mean that should translate to higher percentage of stops. You know what, Kevin Barnhart? But maybe it does.
But there's a likely correlation. It doesn't.
Maybe if you have more drivers on the road, they're more likely to get pulled over.
Correct.
These people are not serious. They're unserious people.
Yes.
I could figure that out in 6th grade. I could figure that.
Of course, if I put this problem in front of a 2nd grader, they'd say, well, with the more drivers, meaning more cars, that means they're more susceptible to being pulled over. Yes, Timmy, that's correct.
Police Chief Johnson said to prevent bias in its work, the police department has a policy on bias-based policing and trainings on cultural competency.
Bias-based policing, does that mean they're in favor of bias?
Quote, we have some of the best trained individuals in the police force, she said. Barnhart said the Citizens Police Oversight Committee wants to learn more about the disparity in Oak Park from the police department and affected community members, if possible. He said he did not know when those conversations might happen. The committee has dealt with a few cases where a traffic stop and resulting interaction caused the driver to question why they were stopped, Barnhart said. The details he added are confidential. Anyone looking to make a complaint to the committee can file a report at the police station or online. That helps hold everyone accountable, he said. We strive for that in all aspects of policing, accountability and transparency, Barnhart said. Okay. I don't know how much more I want to read on this. Oak Park is not alone. The problem is a national one. Thompson said black drivers are often pulled over for minor infractions, such as improper registration or a headlight not working, but these stops can escalate into something bigger. Black and brown drivers may not be given the benefit of the doubt, she said. That ends up becoming a dangerous situation.
Where are the stats on the brown drivers? Go ahead.
A 2020 study from the University of South Carolina showed that black drivers were 63% more likely to be stopped than white drivers, even though researchers said they drive about 16% less.
Well,
okay.
Finally, we get a frequency, a study that takes into account the frequency of driving.
As less for contraband, a reason cited in support of traffic stops. It was found more during searches of white drivers. Okay. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Finally, we have like a real. Here we go. Thompson added,
survey. Yeah.
Thompson added she's heard black and brown drivers consistently and disproportionately say police will ask if they have a gun or about engagement in criminal activity almost immediately during a traffic stop.
But that's just hearsay. How would the black and brown drivers know that they are consistently and disproportionately more likely to be asked if they have a gun? I mean, they're not in the traffic stop with the white people.
Well, this is Thompson. This is the person at the organization saying from her anecdotal experience.
Right. She's heard.
Yeah, I know. I know.
What does that mean? From where?
White drivers have not reported that same experience.
Marshmallow Man down the street? Hey, you, Mrs. Thompson. Did you hear about the black and brown drivers and their guns?
White drivers have not reported that same experience, she said. Police may try to search the vehicle by claiming probable cause or asking for consent, Thompson said, which can prompt individuals to say yes out of fear. Quote, the problem is that interaction isn't necessarily indicative of what we normal people might think of as voluntary, she said. The experience of a person with a police officer is an inherently coercive situation.
Okay.
I don't really.
Now it looks like there's a section called in defense of traffic stops. You want to read that part?
In defense of traffic stops, but some police unions and officers still argue that pulling cars over to search them is necessary to prevent crime, according to a New York Times article. Quote, we, the Oak Park Police Department, have one of the most renowned and unique community policing philosophy and policy. which definitely leads to reducing crime.
Again, not a sentence, but go ahead.
In Philadelphia, a police union sued to block an ordinance banning certain stops, claiming it violated state laws, according to the article. And in Los Angeles, a police union warned that discouraging stops could allow, quote, guns and killers to remain on the road, according to the article. Here we go. In Virginia, police associations, chiefs, and Republican officials campaigned to get rid of a ban on minor stops. However, many still disagree that traffic stops are necessary to keep streets safe. Quote, what unites us all is that we all want to have safe communities, Thompson said. But for individuals who experience these stops over and over again, they don't think that these stops are making them safer.
Wow.
Second article, last one. Reverend Kathy Nolte bids farewell to Good Shepherd Church. She's heading to a new job in ELCA Bishop's office.
Oh, wow. Yeah, another woman playing as though she's a priest. Hey.
Reverend Kathy Nolte will bid farewell to the members and friends of Good Shepherd Lutheran Church at a reception at the church April 13th from 2 to 5 p.m. and at the 8:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Sunday services the next day, April 14th. She is stepping down to take a new job as assistant to the bishop of the Metropolitan Chicago Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.
I fell asleep while you were just reading.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Of the Proddy Church.
I'll wake you up when it gets interesting. Pastor Nolte summarized her time at Good Shepherd by saying, quote, I feel like I am the luckiest person in the world to have had the experience of being in this congregation, walking with them in everything we have faced. Our lives will be entwined forever, but it's time to go. That everything included a church fire that forced the faith community to worship away from home for a year and a half, and Nolte being struck by lightning in 2012.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh my God.
What? No way.
What the hell?
No way.
She was struck by lightning. Well, maybe you should have taken that collar off earlier. Obviously, God's displeased.
The lead pastor of the Red Brick Church on Randolph Street harkened back to her childhood to put into words the spirituality that has sustained her through the joys and challenges of her time at Good Shepherd.
Throughout the interview, her hair stood up on end.
Here's where it gets really good. Quote, I was raised a Roman Catholic, she said.
Oh, God.
And my grandmother was a huge influence on my spirituality. She had a clear sense of God's presence with her all of the time. For example, Nolte's mother was sick once and was in danger of dying. Nolte went to bed and had a dream in which she saw an angel at the head of her mother's hospital bed who turned to her and said, she's going to be okay. I remember waking up, Nolte recalled, and feeling assured that my mom was going to be okay. And she was. God for the future Lutheran pastor was not abstract concept, but a very concrete presence. Okay, I'm glad we have the video because this is the stuff. This is the poor writing that I'm actually trying to read through every week on my phone.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I many apologies.
Here we go. A negative influence on the future Lutheran pastor was the hierarchy in the Catholic Church. Quote, I was born in 1955 in the days before the Second Vatican Council, she explained, when girls were not allowed to serve as acolytes in the Mass.
And nor should they be still.
She compared the authority given to priests who were all male with that given to the nuns whom she deeply respected, and that difference began to, quote, eat away at her understanding of the Roman Catholic hierarchy, she said.
Whatever that means.
Years later, she was serving as a lay leader at a large Lutheran church in Downers Grove, where she had an experience while alone in the sanctuary one day, an experience that seemed to pull everything she had felt in the past together and at the same time opened a door into her future.
It felt a lot like being struck by lightning.
Quote, I don't know what you are trying to say, she said she remembered thinking, but I get the sense that you are telling me that I will feel this if I just work in a church. The woman who had all through her life been certain of God's presence with her now was uncertain regarding where that presence was leading her. Quote, when I signed up for seminary and they asked me what I thought I was supposed to do, she recalled, I said, I don't know. I'm here to figure it out. When the church building at the corner of East and Randolph burned in 2018, Nolte's congregation met for worship that first Sunday in the basement of Euclid Methodist Church. Her sermon was mostly about processing the grief they were all feeling, but she added, quote, "I don't know how to fix this, but you do." She and her congregation not only got through that time of trial, but they matured as a faith community in the process. Quote, "The fire," she said, "was the thing that helped us understand who we were more clearly than anything else had." And then the COVID pandemic hit almost the day after they returned to their own building. Man,
Whoa, man.
quote, "We had become so flexible and adaptable," she said, laughing. "The adapting to going virtual during the pandemic was a piece of cake." Nolte remembered when she was hit by lightning in 2012. "I woke up in what appeared to be an ambulance. I could not remember my name, and I realized that I did not have a good sense of feeling in my arms and legs. I remember this sense of God being right next to me in the ambulance and flippantly saying, 'Well, it's on you.'
Mm.
It was this feeling that I did not know what will be in the future, but I know you are here, and so I will be fine. From the moment when my mother was sick when I was a teenager, that has been my guiding light.
Oh God.
Even though she
Theology
know,
by Disney. More theology by Disney. Go ahead.
even though she knows that parting ways will be emotionally difficult for the congregation as well as herself, she is certain that this is the right move at the right time. She used the metaphor of an orchestra conductor to describe what the transition will be like. She said that being a pastor is like being the conductor of an orchestra, and in her new calling, the bishop will be the conductor, and she will be one of the musicians.
Yes. Now, this is so thoroughly Protestant. There's no element of sacrifice here within liturgy, right? It's all this performative crap.
One of her responsibilities will be working with congregations and their pastors who, quote, "feel like things aren't going right." Because, for example, they no longer have enough money coming in to pay the bills, or there aren't enough people at worship, or as is often the case, both. Reverend David John Haley is the pastor at First Baptist Church, where Good Shepherd met for worship while their building was being restored. He said his memory of Nolte's leadership during that challenging time bodes well for her in her new role. Quote, "Kathy's thoughtful leadership strengthened her congregation during a time of grief," he said. "I'm proud to call Kathy Nolte a fellow minister of the gospel."
Her leadership was electric.
Yeah. Quote, "It feels like I was born for this," Nolte said at the end of the interview. "It's this sense of living out something that I was always meant to do, and it matches who I am to the core of my being."
Hmm. I guess we should be appreciative that she saw her way out of the Catholic Church so she can go and do her little Lutheran thing rather than staying in and contaminating it
Yeah.
with heresy. So wish more bishops, actual bishops in the Catholic Church would do that. So follow Pastor Nolte's example. Blaise Supich. Still no word on whether the Pope's accepted his resignation. Not happening.
No, it got lost in the mail.
Yeah, I got lost in the mail. Uh-huh.
Anyways,
So
that's a segment. That's a pod.
that's it.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Anything
All right,
else?
Charlie. Yeah, that's it. I think this was as cathartic as it was entertaining for me. I hope it is so for the listeners and viewers.
I hope everyone has a good end to their Holy Week as well.
Yes. Oh yeah, a blessed Holy Triduum. And yeah, please celebrate with your families and loved ones the beautiful feast and solemnity, the ultimate and pivotal day of our
I can't wait.
liturgical year, and that's of course the Joyeux Pâques, as they say in Quebec, the Easter. So happy Easter to everyone.
Can't wait. Take
See you
care,
on the
everyone.
flip side.
See you next week. God bless.